Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time we're taking a look at the inner workings of our own minds with...
It's a fascinating topic, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And our source material for this deep dive is excerpts that you listeners sent in from Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. So get ready for some serious aha moments as we explore the two systems running the show inside our heads, System 1 and System 2.
It's like a dynamic duo.
Okay.
Yeah, a dynamic duo. But, instead of fighting crime, they're navigating the complexities of our thoughts and decisions and how we make them.
I like that. So set the scene for us. What are these two systems all about?
Okay. Imagine System 1 as that impulsive, quick-witted friend, all about instinct, gut feelings, and snap judgments.
Right.
It's what helps you dodge, say, a rogue frisbee in the park without even thinking.
Yeah.
Now, System 2, on the other hand, that's the thoughtful, analytical one. It steps in when you need to solve a tricky puzzle or parallel park in a tight space. Situations that require focus and deliberate effort.
So System 1 is like autopilot, and System 2 is like manual mode.
Yes, exactly.
I can definitely relate to that. But Kahneman isn't just describing these two systems, right? He's showing us how they're constantly interacting.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is how often System 1, our fast-thinking friend, influences our decisions even when we think we're being super rational.
Okay.
It's like having this shadow puppeteer kind of pulling some of the strings.
Okay, now that's where it starts to get a little unsettling. Can you give us an example of how this plays out in real life?
Sure. Think about the last time you were maybe scrolling through social media and you saw a headline that made you, instantly angry or fearful.
Yeah.
That's System 1 at work, triggering an emotional response before you've even had a chance to really process the information fully.
Oh, wow. I am totally guilty of that.
Mm-hmm.
So even when I think I'm carefully evaluating information, my gut reactions might be coloring my perceptions.
Precisely. And this is where the concept of cognitive biases comes in. These are predictable glitches in our thinking, often stemming from System 1's need for, speed and simplicity.
Right. Kahneman really dives deep into these biases, doesn't he? One that really stuck with me was the availability heuristic. How easily we recall examples of something influences our judgment of how common it actually is.
Yeah.
This explains why people are more afraid of flying than driving, even though statistically driving is way more dangerous.
Right.
Plane crashes just get way more media coverage, so they're more readily available in our minds.
That's a perfect example. And think about how this applies to decision-making in your own life. Let's say you're considering investing in a new tech company. If you've recently read several news articles about successful startups, you might be more likely to overestimate the likelihood of this particular company succeeding, even if the base rates suggest otherwise.
So the takeaway here is to pause and ask ourselves, is my judgment being swayed by a recent vivid example, or am I looking at the bigger picture? It's exactly.
Okay. I'm starting to see how understanding these biases can be a real game changer. What are some other biases that Kahneman highlights that we should watch out for?
Well, there's the anchoring effect, where an initial number, even a random one, can really skew our estimates.
Oh, right.
Remember the Gandhi example we discussed earlier? The mere suggestion of a high or low number influenced people's guesses about his age at death, even though those numbers had absolutely nothing to do with the actual question.
Right. That was mind-blowing. It's like our brains latch on to that first piece of information, even if it's totally irrelevant, and use it as a reference point.
Exactly. And this can happen in all sorts of situations, from negotiating a salary to estimating project timelines. If you're not aware of the anchoring effect, you could end up, accepting a lower offer or setting really unrealistic expectations.
Okay. So we need to be wary of those initial anchors, especially when we're making important decisions. This is like having a mental toolkit for avoiding those sneaky traps our brains set for us.
I like that. Any other tools we should add to the kit?
Well, Kahneman also talks about WYSIATI.
What's that?
What you see is all there is.
Okay.
Essentially, our fast-thinking system tends to jump to conclusions based on the limited information it has, completely ignoring what it doesn't know.
That's so relatable. It's like when you're piecing together a story in your head based on a few snippets of gossip without considering all the missing pieces.
Precisely. And this can lead to overconfidence and flawed judgments, especially in situations where there's a lot of uncertainty. Think about those times you felt absolutely certain about something, only to find out later that you were missing, crucial information. That's WYSIATI in action.
This is making me seriously rethink how I approach information and decision-making. But we can't talk about thinking without acknowledging the elephant in the room. Emotions.
Right.
Kahneman doesn't shy away from that either, does he?
No, he dives right in. He dives right into how emotions can hijack our thinking, sometimes bypassing rational thought altogether.
It's like our feelings have a secret back door into the control room of our minds. Can you give us an example of how this plays out?
Sure. Think about the affect heuristic, where our gut feeling of liking or disliking something heavily influences our choices. Like, you might invest in a company simply because you love their products without even considering their financial statements.
Oh, that's totally me. I'm definitely guilty of letting my heart rule my head sometimes. But isn't there a danger in dismissing our gut feelings altogether? Don't they sometimes guide us toward the right decision?
That's a great question, and Kahneman acknowledges that intuition can be powerful, especially for experts in certain fields.
It's like a seasoned firefighter who could sense which way a fire will spread, even if they can't logically explain it.
Exactly. But he also cautions against blindly trusting intuition, especially in situations where the stakes are high. He introduces the concept of the illusion of validity. The feeling of confidence we have in our intuitions is often completely unrelated to how accurate they actually are.
So it's about knowing when to trust our gut and when to take a step back and engage that slower, more deliberate thinking process.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between intuition and analysis.
It's like learning to be the conductor of our own mental orchestra, knowing when to let the different sections shine and when to bring in the whole ensemble for a more powerful performance.
That's a wonderful analogy. And it speaks to the core of what Kahneman is trying to teach us. We have more control over our thinking than we often realize.
It's about becoming aware of the different players in our minds, understanding their strengths and weaknesses, and learning to orchestrate them effectively. This is already giving me a whole new perspective on how my mind works, but we're just scratching the surface here, right? There's so much more to unpack in Kahneman's work.
Absolutely. We've only just begun our exploration of the fascinating world of thinking fast and slow.
Yeah. And speaking of control, Kahneman dives into how we perceive and make decisions in the face of uncertainty, especially when it comes to risk.
Yeah, this feels especially relevant today,
Absolutely. Where we're constantly bombarded with information about potential threats, climate change, economic instability.
Right.
How does Kahneman help us navigate this landscape of uncertainty?
Well, he introduces this concept of prospect theory, which challenges, those traditional economic models that assume people are perfectly rational when they're weighing risks and rewards.
So it's acknowledging that our emotions play a role in how we assess risk. It's not just about cold, hard calculations.
Exactly. Prospect theory highlights that we feel the pain of a loss more intensely than the pleasure of an equivalent game.
This makes so much sense.
Really?
Like, it explains why people are often so risk averse.
Yes.
Even when the potential rewards outweigh the potential losses.
Right.
It's like that fear of losing $100
Yes.
is stronger than the excitement of gaining $100.
Exactly. And this has huge implications for how we approach, investing, negotiating, even everyday choices.
So how can we apply this understanding of loss aversion to make better decisions?
Well, one strategy is to reframe the situation. Focusing on what you stand to lose by not taking action, rather than what you might gain. For example, instead of thinking about the potential profits of an investment, consider the potential cost of missing out on that opportunity.
It's like shifting our perspective from fear of loss to fear of missing out, a classic FOMO play.
Exactly.
But Kahneman doesn't stop at loss aversion, does he? He also talks about how we tend to overestimate our understanding of the past.
Right.
And our ability to predict the future.
That's right. He introduces what he calls the narrative fallacy, which is our tendency to create stories that make sense of the past, often overlooking the role of chance and randomness.
It's like those rags to riches stories we love.
Yeah.
They make it seem like success is inevitable if you just work hard enough.
Yeah.
But they often ignore the element of luck or the systemic factors at play.
Absolutely. And this can lead to a false sense of confidence in our ability to predict the future. Whether it's, the stock market or the outcome of an election.
So how do we avoid falling prey to the narrative fallacy?
Well, one way is to actively seek out alternative explanations for events, especially those that challenge our existing beliefs. Another is to be more mindful of the role of chance and randomness in our lives.
It's about acknowledging that we don't always have all the answers.
Right.
And that sometimes things just happen.
Exactly. And this leads into another fascinating concept, the planning fallacy,
Ooh, tell me about it.
which is our tendency to underestimate
Yeah?
the time and resources it'll actually take to complete a project.
Yes.
Even when we have, past experience to guide us.
Oh, the queen of overly ambitious to-do lists over here.
It's something we all struggle with.
Yeah.
Kahneman attributes it to our tendency to focus on the best case scenario, neglecting the inevitable delays and setbacks that are part of any complex endeavor.
So what's the antidote to this chronic underestimation?
Well, Kahneman suggests taking an outside view, looking at similar projects and their actual timelines, rather than relying solely on our own, often overly optimistic projections.
Right, it's about grounding our plans in a more realistic assessment of what's actually achievable.
Yes.
This is making me rethink how I approach project planning. It's like I need to add a reality check column to my to-do lists.
It might not be a bad idea.
Yeah.
And this principle of seeking outside perspectives applies to all sorts of decision-making, not just project planning.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
From cognitive biases to loss aversion to the planning fallacy.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost like our brains are wired to make these predictable errors.
Yeah.
Is there any hope for us? Can we actually overcome these limitations?
Well, while we may never be perfectly rational beings,
Yeah.
Kahneman suggests we can learn to recognize these biases and adjust our thinking accordingly.
Okay.
One strategy is to engage System 2, more often slow down,
Right.
question our assumptions, and seek out evidence that challenges our initial judgments.
It's like hitting the pause button on that impulsive System 1
Yeah.
and giving System 2 a chance to step in and take the reins.
Exactly. And this is where the concept of metacognition comes in.
Okay.
The ability to think about our own thinking.
So, becoming more aware of how our minds work?
Yes.
It's like having a mental mirror,
Right.
allowing us to see our own thought processes more clearly.
Precisely. And this awareness is crucial for recognizing when our intuition might be leading us astray.
Yeah.
And when we need to call in the reinforcements.
Okay.
Engage System 2.
Right.
Gather more information or seek outside perspectives.
This is incredibly empowering. It's like we're not just at the mercy of our own biases.
Right.
We can learn to recognize them, challenge them, and ultimately make more informed and rational decisions.
That's the key takeaway here. We're not doomed to repeat these errors.
Right.
With awareness and effort, we can become better thinkers and decision makers.
It's like we've been given a secret decoder ring for the human mind, allowing us to decipher those hidden patterns and biases that influence our thoughts and actions. But we're not done yet, are we? There's still more to explore in Thinking Fast and Slow.
That's right. Kahneman offers even more insights and strategies for improving our thinking and navigating the complexities of the world around us. One area I think that we often struggle with is, predicting how we'll feel in the future.
Oh, yeah.
Kahneman calls this effective forecasting.
Okay.
And we're surprisingly bad at it, like accurately predicting the intensity and duration of our own emotions.
Oh, this is so true. Like when you think winning the lottery will bring you eternal happiness.
Yes.
But then, a few months later, you're back to your baseline level of happiness.
Yeah.
Maybe even feeling a little empty.
Exactly. Or when you're dreading a difficult conversation.
Right.
But then it turns out to be not nearly as bad as you imagine.
Yeah.
We tend to overestimate the impact of both positive and negative events on our overall well-being.
So how do we account for this miswanting, as Kahneman calls it?
Well, he suggests, focusing on the factors that truly contribute to long-term happiness and well-being.
Okay.
Things like meaningful relationships, engaging activities, a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
Rather than chasing those, fleeting pleasures or trying to avoid every potential source of discomfort.
It's about focusing on what truly matters,
Sure.
rather than getting caught up in those emotional roller coasters.
Exactly.
I love that perspective. But speaking of emotional roller coasters, Kahneman also talks about how our memories of experiences are often shaped by
Yes.
the peak and end moments, rather than the overall experience.
That's right. He calls this the peak end rule.
Okay.
And it explains why we might remember a vacation fondly, even if most of it was, fairly uneventful.
Right.
As long as there was one amazing sunset or a delicious final meal.
So it's like our brains create these highlight reels of our experiences,
Yes.
rather than recording every single moment.
Exactly. And this has implications for how we design experiences,
Oh.
whether it's a vacation, a presentation, or even a simple interaction.
So if I want to create a positive, lasting impression, I should focus on creating a memorable peak moment and a satisfying ending.
It's certainly a strategy worth considering. And speaking of strategies, Kahneman offers some practical advice for making better decisions,
Okay.
especially in high-stakes situations.
This is where it gets really interesting. What are some of those key takeaways that our listeners can apply to their own lives?
Well, one is to be aware of the halo effect,
Okay.
which is our tendency to judge someone based on a single positive trait, even if it's unrelated to the task at hand.
So like assuming someone who's really charming is also competent,
Yeah,
even if they have no actual experience in the area.
exactly. We need to be careful about letting those, superficial impressions cloud our judgment,
Right.
especially when we're making important decisions about, hiring, promoting,
Yeah.
or investing in people.
It's about looking beyond those first impressions and seeking more objective evidence to support our judgments.
Right.
What other tips does Kahneman offer?
Well, he also emphasizes the importance of using checklists and algorithms whenever possible,
Yeah.
especially in complex or high-pressure environments.
This makes so much sense. It's like pilots using checklists to ensure they don't miss any crucial steps during takeoff or landing.
Precisely. Checklists and algorithms can help to, reduce errors and improve consistency, even for experts who might feel overconfident in their own abilities.
It's about acknowledging that we all have blind spots.
Yeah.
And that relying on systems and procedures can help us to overcome those limitations.
Exactly. And this leads into another key concept, the importance of feedback.
Right. We all need feedback to improve our performance, whether it's in our work, our relationships, or even our thinking.
But Kahneman stresses the importance of seeking out feedback that's specific, actionable,
Okay.
and focused on the process rather than the person.
So instead of saying, you did a great job,
Yeah.
it's more helpful to say, I really appreciated how you clearly outlined the problem and explored all the possible solutions.
Exactly. That type of feedback helps us to, identify specific areas where we can improve, rather than just reinforcing a general sense of competence or inadequacy.
It's about creating a culture of continuous learning and improvement,
Right.
both individually and collectively.
Yes.
I'm starting to see how Kahneman's work isn't just about understanding the quirks of the human mind, It's about using that understanding to make better decisions, improve our performance,
Yeah.
and ultimately live more fulfilling lives.
That's a wonderful summary.
Thanks.
Thinking fast and slow is a treasure trove of insights
It is.
that can help us to navigate the complexities of life with more awareness, more intentionality, and ultimately more wisdom.
Well, we've certainly covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into thinking fast and slow. From those two dueling systems of thinking to the surprising power of our emotions, the pitfalls of intuition, and the importance of slowing down and engaging our more deliberate thinking processes, Kahneman offers a roadmap for becoming better thinkers and decision makers.
And perhaps even more importantly, he invites us to embrace our humanness with all its flaws and biases, and to approach the world with a sense of curiosity, humility, and a willingness to learn and grow.
It's a journey of self-discovery that never ends, and one that I highly encourage you listeners to continue exploring, perhaps by diving into the full book, Thinking Fast and Slow. Until next time, keep those minds engaged, and remember to question everything, even your own assumptions.